First of all, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It means so much to me. And I've been stalking your profile for a few weeks, and I cannot get over how talented you are. Genuinely, you guys are so talented. Your sound is so eclectic and so interesting. And I just wanted to know, first of all, I guess introduce yourself. You should introduce yourself to everyone who may not know you.
Definitely. I'm Star. I'm the singer for the Sunset Kings. Right now, we're all spread out because of quarantine. So I'm in Texas right now.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I don't have my friends with me, but I think they trust me enough to speak for them a little bit. So,
All good. That's totally cool. So, how did Sunset Kings come to be?
so the Sunset Kings started the name started off as a joke, but we all met in college. We were all playing in different jazz bands. I was the only one that wasn't a music student. I was a writer. I was studying literature, and I decided on a whim to start singing jazz. And through that, I met all my friends who were in the Sunset Kings. Well, it's weird because we're a different lineup than we used to be.
Right. Yeah. So,
So
I know because you were a band and then you all went off to do
mhm.
independent work. And this happened when a tragedy happened in your band. Do you mind going on about that?
Yeah. So our bassist Shag, who was my guitarist brother, and also our producer at the time, it's kind of weird. It was kind of like a family band.
Mm-hmm.
They had all been playing music for a while, and then Shag, they all taught him how to play bass.
Mm-hmm.
So my guitarist is related to my old producer, and then his other brother was our bassist. We were like best friends. We all lived in the same house. We spent every week together. We would rehearse every single week, if not once but twice, and play shows every single week. Like we started off in like a local coffee shop every single Saturday, 2 hours. Yeah, that was 2016 up until the summer of 2018. We played our first festival, and then in August he passed away in this freak accident. It was terrible. I was out on a job. I was supposed to meet up with him for a party, and I got the call, and I honestly had no idea what was happening. I got to the hospital, saw some girls that we were supposed to be hanging out with, a couple of our friends. They didn't even want to say that, what had happened. I saw them at 2 a.m. I didn't know that he had passed away till it was 5 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, oh
So
my gosh.
yeah, it was a little crazy. And then I remember that whole night. I remember getting back to our house, and the door was locked. I didn't have a key. So I climbed the fire escape
Oh,
up
been there.
to my friend Matt's room. Yeah, I climbed the fire escape and I knocked on his window. And him and Hannah, who was the violinist, they opened their window. It's like 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. They're like, what's up? And I'm like, dude, something bad happened.
Oh,
And yeah, it was a terrible way to deliver that news. The weird part about grief is, you get super close. In my experience with that specific situation, we got super close, and then we got very, very distant. Everyone deals with it differently. It's, everyone's got their own process.
100%. I'm so sorry that happened. I can't, when I read that, I cannot even imagine what that would be like, especially for a band that when you're supposed to be a cohesive unit and then you go off and you're trying to still be a cohesive unit, but it's so hard because of, again, an event that shakes everyone. It seems like he was a glue in a way.
Definitely. I used to joke around and say he was the only person that was like well adjusted in the group. And he was the only one that was actually rooted to Boston. All of us had moved in from like different places. He actually grew up in Stoneham, like a suburb of Boston. And
Okay.
yeah, so he was rooted there, and we all kind of knew, all the people that we knew kind of came to be because, he had his connections there. And he never thought about playing music. He was a hockey player. So just ended up picking up the bass in like a week. He's just really good off the bat. Yeah, we did really well together for like up until the beginning of 2020, and then things just different stresses, trying to come up with new music, trying to make the transition into being a professional band was really difficult. We released our first album right after he passed away. So that was November 2018. And then we went on tour, and our fan base was growing outside of Boston, and we were doing really well. And then all the weird stuff started happening. It's like we can't practice in our house anymore because it reminds us too much of Shag. So we have to get a rehearsal space now. Trying to figure out those extra expenses, those extra logistics that we didn't think would happen. Trying to get through contracts, trying to book shows. Like, where are we going to like spend our time, invest our time into? Is it going to be Seattle? Is it going to be California? Is it going to be Texas, Florida? All of those things pulled us apart, So I guess creative differences is what we call them. But I think that what happens when something like that rocks your world, and I feel like a lot of people can relate because of quarantine, the pandemic, like maybe not even losing someone, but like losing your plans of what you're going to do. Something that happens is you just start thinking about what's important to you and how little time it feels like you have to do it. And unfortunately for the band, that started to feel more and more like us doing our individual projects. But there's so much love there, everyone seems to be doing really well, and I'm pretty happy about what the last 4 months have been. So it's definitely been a ride. We've been connecting with so many people, reconnecting with old friends, and I'm happy about what's happening right now.
Good. Well, I'm happy you guys were able to find some sort of solace after all of that happening. And in a weird way, at least what I've learned, because I've been through something really similar to with grief, and so much art comes out of it, which is weird because I was so used to writing happy, or like I write poetry, so I was so used to writing happy things, and then once this thing happened, it just got really dark. But my poetry was so dark, but I read it to the professors or whatever, and they were like, "This is unbelievable," and I was like, "But it's so sad." And you like it? And they're like, "Yeah, because we can relate to it and we understand it, and we've been through something similar." So, I mean, I appreciate you as just a human being, and just for doing what you can with what was given to you, given the circumstances. And I think it's really interesting that your band still considers himself a band despite the fact that they're off doing their own thing.
Yeah. I mean, to me, something that I've drilled into everyone that I've worked with, I've drilled it into their heads. Like, the way that we think about bands, I feel like it's kind of outdated. I mean, you have the Gorillaz, you have Daft Punk, those are bands, To me, it's a storyline. And to me, it's the thing that really kept me going. And I felt like kept us together in our hardest times was remembering that it's the band for us was the story that touched all of us. To me, that's what keeps it going for me. I think that there's still more story to tell. I think that we still have a lot of testimony to uncover and share with people. You don't know where life will take you. So I never imagined that I'd be writing what I'm writing right now, just like you probably never imagined what you would be writing. And you're so right. I didn't know you wrote poetry. I'd love to hear it sometime. The depth that comes from feeling something extreme, it colors all of your emotions. So I bet you could write something super happy right now and it would feel that much more vivid.
Yeah, because I personally had a really, really hard year. I mean, everyone had a hard year in 2020, don't get me wrong. But even before the pandemic, I was suicidal and I didn't want to be on this earth. And through that, I ended up finding such happiness because I got help, and I, found the end of the tunnel, and my doctors helped me so much. And so now the happy things that I'm writing are like, they hit so much different. It's not just like, oh, like cute little music or cute little poems. And now it's like, oh, it's like deep happiness, and complicated happiness is so beautiful. So I'm
so happy.
Thank you.
I'm really happy about that. Thank you for sharing that. I know that's a vulnerable thing to say. And I just want to say, based on like, just because you told me that, I'm really happy that we have the chance to talk. And I've watched your other interviews, and the insight and energy you bring to them, and I don't know, just finding people like little gems that are just starting to bloom.
I know. Thank you.
I think it's a real gift. So thank you so much for choosing to stay here with us.
Oh, thank you. I mean,
it's a big thing.
Oh my God. Thank you. Thank you. That's so sweet. Thank you so much. I was really worried about opening up about that as well. And, the first thing I read in your bio that you sent me and, over email, when I read that, like that was like a highlight of your band was this death. And I was taken aback by the fact that you guys were so connected and together, because death either, yeah, as you said, it brings people close. It also brings people not close. It makes them distant, or tragedies, you'll cut people off, or trauma does weird things to people. And when I read that, I was like, wow, like this is a point. It's not a point of like departing. It's a point of like remembrance. And I thought that was really beautiful.
Yeah.
I think it's really cool that you always pay tribute to him. So that's really beautiful. I also wanted to get
Thank
into,
you so much.
of course. I also wanted to get into your most recent work, which it seems that you wrote it in 2019 and it carried into 2020, was Shadow Work in Technicolor. What was his name? The bassist? Sorry.
Shag.
Was he on that record?
His name was Shag.
Shag.
He wasn't on that record, but if you're like a music lover, an audiophile, like a lot of the bass lines that I ended up playing on that record, I played all the bass. I played most of the instruments on that record, actually. It all comes from listening to that first record so deeply. Like me and my old guitarist, Matt, like we would listen to that record every single day. Sometimes together, sometimes other, like while we were going to work and stuff. We'd break down the musical parts. We'd talk about like what we wanted to do in the next albums. So like the way that I played the keys, I developed off of having to learn Matt's guitar parts, because he started playing bass when we were touring. My keys playing was developed off of learning his guitar parts, and my bass playing was developed from learning all of Nick's bass lines. So if you listen to that record as a musician, a lot of those ideas, they all echo things that happened in our first record. For like anyone who's like a bona fide musician, there's our single Metronome, in which we have a music video out for. The very end of the song is actually the bass line from our song The Good, which is from our first album. Which I love that bass line, and Nick or Shag came up with it really, really quickly, and all of us in the band love that bass line. So I put that in at the very end of that song as like a little echo.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
it's so beautiful.
He wasn't on that record, but yes, it did carry in from 2019. The project was supposed to be called Songs About Touring, because they were songs that I'd started writing while we were on tour.
Right.
And over quarantine, Numi, my saxophonist, he told me about shadow work. And I don't know if you've heard of shadow work. It's like kind of a Jungian term, like Carl Jung. So it's a psychological concept where you're trying to integrate the shadow into your personality, into your ego. So it's taking these dark, unilluminated parts of yourself, things that you avoid talking about or avoid thinking about, and really just turning the light on them and really vividly looking at them and trying to understand why you do those things, rather than saying, no, this is wrong. I feel like if people knew that, that we can look at those quote unquote ugly parts of ourselves and become, I don't know, more beautiful human beings because of the work that we put into just paying attention to those ugly parts, I feel like a lot of things would change in the world.
I agree
It's
with you
the
there.
hardest work to do. So.
Oh yeah, that's like I learned that I have like different attachment styles, and like when it comes to relationships, and it's like, well, why do I? It's like, instead of being like, Alexa, you're too clingy, or you're whatever, you don't trust people, or you trust people, I should say, you trust people too easily. And then instead of being like, Alexa, like be cool, it's like, wait, no, but why are you doing that? They go, Alexa, like chill.
Who are you doing it for?
Yeah, exactly. Am I doing it for me?
Have you read Attached?
No, I haven't.
I heard it's a great book.
Ooh, very cool. Interesting. I will take a look at that if I pick up a book again, because I'm more of an audio listener. That's why I love podcasts. That's why I'm into podcasts, because because my ADD is just so atrocious. It's like I don't read books. Like I usually don't read books. I usually listen to them. Mm-hmm. So that's why I really got into podcasting, which is why I'm here.
I totally feel that. I'm about to go on a road trip, so I actually just downloaded. I was looking for it everywhere, and I found out that they have an audiobook of Attached. So it is out there.
Let's go.
Yeah, because I'm the same way.
Oh, what do your other band members, what are they doing right now?
Right now, Hannah Sheesday has a couple singles out, and she's the violin player in our band, just to clarify that. Our guitarist has music out under, the project name is Eric. I think it's kind of cool because if you listen to The Ballad of Bella Fury, which is our first album, you can kind of hear a continuation of that sound into Eric's music. So if you're a fan of that sound, you can definitely go into that, because a lot of that sound was really built off of him and Shag just vibing off of each other. And then I'm actually working on Numi, our saxophone player's solo album right now. So I'm producing it, I'm mixing it, and I'm really excited for everyone to hear that. Me and Numi are really, really invested in storytelling and like how important it is for us to share our stories. And I feel like you as a poet could definitely vibe with this. It was the whole premise of shadow work in Technicolor. It's what brings all those vivid colors out of our existence. Getting vulnerable, getting deep is something that we've been working on, and I'm really excited to just have a chance to translate that into a solo project for him. So that's what he's working on.
That's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, it's so that's so amazing and so beautiful. I was going to say that I looked at, I mean, I know it's just Instagram, but I've been like reading some of your captions. I'm like, they are so eloquent and so deep and heartfelt. Like I feel like I'm reading a diary sometimes when I read your work or read your interviews or whatever. You guys are A, geniuses, but B, your writing is impeccable. And you said you were studying literature. So do you guys, obviously you write your own music, but how do you start your lyrical process?
That's a hard question to answer. It changes so often. So a lot of it starts from a poetry-based process. I studied with this poet named Joyce Pesaroff when I was going to UMass, and she wrote this poem called The Hardness Scale. And after I read that, I was like, I have to find this person. I found out she was teaching a class, so I specifically went to her office. I guess like the real life version of stalking someone's Instagram. And I was like, I have to take this class. I wasn't an English major at that point. I was studying biology. I told her, I know that I don't have the prerequisites for this class, but I want you to see my writing, and I feel like I could really benefit from learning from you. And so she took me in as a special student. Something she taught me was that specificity is the most important thing when you write. A lot of my favorite poets are like Sylvia Plath. I do like, Joyce Pesaroff, Allen Ginsberg, a lot of people that were doing these heart-wrenching poems about the self. And my writing process begins from there. I take things from conversations that I've had with people. Like if we were having a conversation out in the park and you said something that was really cool, I'd be like, yo, like, wait, I need to write this down real quick. A lot of my lines start from there. So it's like taking a soundbite and reading it a month or two later, and then it takes on a life of its own. To me, it's like sculpting. You have this block of clay, and then you're just trying to find the form that it wants to turn into. In our first album, that was a lot of like telling this story of how I tried to come up in the music industry in California when I finished high school. And it's a lot about like rejection and not knowing your self-worth and people telling you that you're not enough of this or inadequate in some way, or like you're not going to make it because people that look like you just don't make it. I mean, since you shared some things, getting into like some of the stuff that I don't really share with most people is like you get into like these cycles of people just really lost, trying to find themselves in sex and drugs and like guess relationships, but like never being able to find yourself. And that was the Ballad of Bella Fury. I took those journal entries and those poems that I wrote from that era, and I started adapting them by going to poetry shows every single week. And that's how my writing style developed. And then for this one, I was listening to a lot of music with my friends. It's from going on road trips. It's from being on tour and sharing music with my friends. To me, this album is a lot more physical because it's more sonic based. It is more pop or accessible than our first album was. And that's because the way that I wrote it was for sonics. I was listening to a lot of music that my friends liked, memorizing it, and then trying to see what that sounded like when it came out of my body. So like it felt like training, and everything going forward is collaborative. So, that process is still changing.
Wow, that is So cool. I feel like words like lack what like my response would just lack anything into compared to what you said, because that is just so intricate and beautiful and methodical. Wow, you read a lot for sure. I had a question about the title Shadow Work in Technicolor. I thought it was interesting how you're saying shadow work in Technicolor. What was the in Technicolor about or referring to?
After going into like it's like this concept of going into the darkness with like the shadow work and resurfacing into this brighter, more vivid, more engaging world because you're present. You know, it's that feeling of being present in your surroundings. I don't know if you've had that feeling. You go to the beach with someone that you are very interested in. It's like 2:00 in the morning and you're just walking on the sand, hear the ocean waves, and there are just colors that you could never capture on film. The Technicolor in that memory of mine is like, or in that situation, is understanding that that is a really important and significant moment, and just taking a moment to stop, take everything in, and let yourself be the person that you need to be in that moment. It doesn't always have to be a romantic thing, but like we have so many opportunities to do that every single day. You know, like if you're talking to a friend or family member, if you're in a conflict, that to me is Technicolor. It is that feeling of being so present in something because you've done the work. You're not afraid to get angry with someone because it's not, oh, I can't get angry because I'm going to scare this person away. It's, I have to let this person know that I'm angry because they're touching or they're about to cross a boundary of mine and I care about them. This is a crucial conversation to have, right?
I agree. Yeah, as you were saying all these things, Anne Hathaway, she was in this interview and they were talking about her wedding and she's like, I know this day will never happen again. So, you know, she put her like phone down, whatever, and she just stood in the center of the wedding and then just did like a 360, like just took 5 minutes and just looked at everything. And
Absolutely.
ever since, and I didn't realize that. I was like, wow, I need to slow down, because that's my issue is slowing down. I have a hard time slowing down when I'm nervous, especially my old interviews when I'm really nervous. You can tell I'm nervous because it was my first 2 interviews ever.
I mean, it's excitement.
It is total excitement. And I'm not saying I'm not excited with you, because I'm super excited with you, but I feel like a calm. I feel just like immediately comfortable because I think it's just like your aura and your presence. And so that's what I've been trying to do is the Anne Hathaway 360. That's what I've been trying to do throughout my life. And I totally understand where you're coming from with like, you can't capture something on film because, you know, it's everyone's like, oh, it's like the, you know, picture don't do it justice. It's like pictures don't do basically anything justice to a degree, not to, you know, take away from photographers because they're going to be like, what are you talking about?
The whole thing about like, yeah, I know you were saying you wouldn't take anything away from photographers, but like even like poets, photographers, musicians, like all that we're trying to do is do enough of the work that no one sees, which is the shadow work, you know, and it's not always stuff that's in here. It's your craft. It's to do all that work that no one will ever see, just to get to that one moment where you have to translate the thing into something that will capture someone's emanation in the way that it captured you, but they're not seeing it firsthand. They're seeing a photo. So, I mean, that's great photography. And the Anne Hathaway 360, I was like emphatically just like, yo, like, yes, because imagine how much power you have to have, how much security you have to do that. Can you picture being in Times Square, anywhere huge, like London, like Paris for the first time, and just stopping in the middle of the street and doing that Anne Hathaway 360? People would think you're nuts, right? But the amount of power and security you have to have in yourself to really just like slow down and take it all in without like any of the thoughts of like, oh, I look weird, or any of those limiting thoughts coming into your brain. What you said, the Anne Hathaway 360 is a perfect example.
I think that's a really cool way the way you describe Technicolor, because I didn't even know what that meant, honestly. I also wanted to talk about, I was like, oh, I said, is there anything particular you want to talk about? And you said starting on June 18th, we're releasing a song every month for a year. How did this come to be?
It's kind of weird, but something that we have always wanted to do in the band was, a bunch of my friends are like, they write for TV and like they just like, they want to write for film and stuff. So like they would all like study this stuff. And they came up with this, we had this conversation one time about like how everything is serial now, right? You could take a whole show, like a whole concept, and it used to be short films, but now, like, because of Netflix, everything is a TV series. I wanted to apply that to music, and I know a lot of people are doing the whole single every month thing, but like the way that I kind of viewed it was making our story episodic. Instead of trying to come up with these albums, which I kind of saw as books, I wanted to try and do something that was more real time, more present, more indicative of what me and my friends were going through and are going to be going through at the time. You know, we're setting that structure in place, that cage in place, so that everything is more real time, more present. It is putting that pressure on ourselves. I mean, we all got so productive over quarantine in the band. It does come from a place of like, rather than writing from a place of nostalgia and remembering, trying to write from a place of acknowledging that we are in the present and what is the story now as it's happening, like trying to not think about it too much. For me as an artist, getting to a place of just being able to process and be whatever I am at the moment, that's what I feel in my spirit is the next step to take. So from June this year up until June 2022, a song every month, and it will feel like, I guess, a journal. And we'll see what happens. I really don't have any plans for it besides putting those songs out every month. So
I love it.
I'm just as in the dark as you are.
You're like, and I'm still waiting on the song to come out. No, you're like working on it. No, I really like that, especially because when an artist, they'll come out with an album, for example, like the Black Lives Matter movement, songs will be coming out, but you notice they're sort of dated. Nothing wrong with that, but you notice that, you know, it's almost like this happened a few months ago, but I'm releasing it now. And same with there's an artist named Madison Beer. I don't know if you've heard of her. She's awesome.
Love her.
Yeah, love her. Hi, Madison. If you're watching this, I love you.
She has an amazing voice.
I know. Oh my God, I could fangirl over her for days. So she created this album called Life Support during a really, really, really dark time when she found out that she had a borderline personality disorder. And I think she had broken up with someone, and it was just like everything was like coming to collapse. And so Life Support was her album to get her through. And now she's in a completely different place in life. She's so happy. And she felt like at the time when she was about to release Life Support, I'm pretty sure Black Lives Matter was happening. So then she kept delaying it because obviously she's like, this is not the time and place to release, just because like, she's like, Definitely. We need to focus on the movement. Then she admitted during an interview that it came to a point where she's like, do I even want to release this? Because I'm in such a different place now. And of course, she ended up releasing it. We all love it. She did a concert. It was great. But I was like, wow, I'm like the fact that you're just it's almost like you found closure and you're so far past that point in time that you're like, do I just scrap it? I heard that. I was like, what? Like you were about to just not release it?
Yeah. It's wild to think about. And I feel like as artists, like, I feel like it's that, like you said, that closure, like earlier when you were talking about writing poetry, it is to express something. It is to feel something internally expressed out into the world. Mm-hmm. And like, just a lot of times I view it as a lifeline. It's like, I'm throwing this line out and I'm like, hey, does anyone else feel like this? And 9 times out of 10, yeah, people do feel that way. And if I'm throwing out a lifeline that I don't identify with anymore, I understand how a lot of artists are like, I shouldn't even release this. It's not indicative of what I'm going through anymore. It doesn't speak to me anymore. Or I'm so far past this. I'm really glad that she released Life Support, because it is even more artistic in that way, because, you know, she did that work. She is still struggling with borderline personality disorder. And that was like the final battle in releasing that. It's just like, oh, I don't feel this anymore. It's like that love me, but I don't want to be around you kind of thing, like with her album. And I'm really glad that she got to a point that she was able to just be like, I'm going to put this out because the people who know my story, they're going to respond to it. Mm-hmm. And that's just as important as me going through it.
Exactly. It's kind of like when I read my old poetry, I'm just like, oh, that's dark. I'm like, ooh, like, oh, ow. I'm like, I kind of feel the wounds reopening. I still show people because they're like, well, I'm going through this right now, or, oh, I also went through that. And I'm really happy that when Madison released it, like basically every single song she released, I felt so hard. And I feel that with your music as well. Like, I just feel like everything, I feel like it's like goosies. You get like little goosebumps. I'm like, ah. That's why I was like, I'm fangirling before this interview. I'm like, I can't believe I can't believe I'm going to talk to this guy. Like, I'm like, I feel like it's just like so beautiful, like literally beyond words. It's so beautiful beyond words to a point where you have to sing it. And that's what I felt like your music was. So I'm really happy you still released it despite everything that your group went through.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course. You guys are so unique and you are such a gem. And I think you're going to do so many great things. Do you have any plans for the future when it comes to performing live once, you know, everyone's getting vaccinated and stuff like that?
In 2020, we had dates in Greece and Albania, in Rome. That hurt me that we weren't able to do that. I'd been building those connections for at least a year.
Oh my God.
And I'd really like to get back there and be able to do those shows.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm really happy that we were able to release something over quarantine, because we were able to reconnect with those fans, those friends of mine. Obviously, I want to be touring in the US again, but you know, we're gonna wait a little bit till things normalize. We have our first show for the summer on the 16th. It's gonna be a live stream, so it's not too crazy, but it is important for us. So
that's awesome. So if you guys are all in, so you're in Texas, where's everyone else?
Everyone else right now is in Boston.
Okay.
So I will be traveling up to Boston as this podcast is being released into the world.
Nice. Why did you move back to Texas?
So when quarantine started, I was kind of on this wave. So like I was telling you about like the different ways that people grieve. I had spent a lot of time away from home. I grew up in Texas, in South Texas, the Rio Grande Valley, a couple hours away, maybe from like where, I don't know if you heard of Selena.
Mm-hmm.
She grew up. And when I left home, I moved to California. I finished high school in California, and I didn't really look back. I was trying to make it as a musician. I went through, you know, a lot of heartbreak, and I ended up in Boston with a band. I had that chip on my shoulder of people telling me no and telling me that I couldn't make it because of things I couldn't change, like the way that I look. I mean, obviously you can get plastic surgery, but I mean, that's besides the point. But like, you know, like the way that I looked, or like the way that I sang, or the way that I wrote, a lot of things that I was very ready to just like attack the industry with. And I was so driven and like obsessed. By the time we got to releasing our first album and Shag passed away, we were touring and we come back to Boston, and my friends, they had their family around. They had that little bit of respite from like all of the craziness. And then I didn't really have that support system. I've been feeling that I'd been neglecting those relationships in my life. So at the end of 2019, I endeavored to, even if I didn't feel comfortable, I was going to take a weekend every month and just go see my parents. In March, that's what I was doing. We finished our last show, which was a conference. It was a show in central Pennsylvania. And then I flew down to Texas, and my father got hit with the coronavirus, and it was really bad.
Oh my gosh.
Very, very bad. Yeah. So he was in a coma for 2 months and in the hospital bed bound for 2 months after that. Like he had lost so much weight, lost all muscle control. He had to relearn how to speak. And I was there for all of that. So it wasn't necessarily me moving back to Texas, but first I got stuck here and then I chose to stay here. I'm really happy about the way that things turned out, because I've gotten to learn so much about my father that I wouldn't have learned otherwise if I hadn't stayed here. And I feel so much more rooted, and I'm able to go back out and bring that to the people that are in my life and that are going to be touched by the stories that I have to share. I really have no regrets. It's just weird now that everything's opening up. I don't know what life is going to be, because before this, I was planning on moving to New York City, and those connections are still there. And I'm planning on making that transition as things normalize, but we'll see where things end up after the summer.
Right. I am so sorry to hear that, and I hope he's doing better. Is he?
He's doing way better.
Nice.
Yeah, he's on supplemental oxygen, and that's how he's going to be until the end of his life.
Mm-hmm.
But like we talked about, like, you know, being that much more present, having that much more gratitude, like just really feeling your existence. He feels it in a different way than I do. Obviously, he touched death.
Yeah, no kidding. I'm sure that it changed you at least seeing him touch death is that must have given you a whole new perspective. My dad was actually on the front lines, so and still is on the front lines technically, and he's done so
Glad for
much
his
work.
service.
Thank you. Yeah, I ended up being stranded. I was supposed to go home for the summer and be a sailing instructor in Colorado, and then he was like, "Well, if you come home, you can't leave the house." And so I ended up being stuck in Colorado. It's nuts. I'm not stuck here. Like, okay, I could be stuck in worse places.
With
like
all the beautiful views and the
yeah, I'm stuck here. Yeah. So I didn't change my whole game plan. But no, my dad has
No, I
seen
feel
just the crazy, crazy things with the pandemic. And it's sad that people don't take it seriously. Especially like I'm sitting here, I'm like, I haven't seen my father in 6 months and he's risking his life. And it's so heartbreaking. I'm so happy to hear that your dad is doing better. And wow, I feel like that was like that was like when you said like I just felt like I had to go back home and then that happened. That was like divine intervention. That had to be divine intervention because thank God
Definitely.
you were home when that happened.
I know. I feel the same way, and that's why I feel like shadow work in Technicolor. I started recording while he was in the hospital, and it started with that first track, Aftermath. I don't know if you remember it, but to me, I feel like it's a hidden gem on the album because it doesn't sound like anything else that I've ever heard. A lot of people that are really close to me listen to it, but like not a lot of new fans ever get down to that part of it. So Aftermath, I wrote that while my father was in the hospital, and the cocktail of terrible emotions I was going through, they shed light on how I felt about, one of my best friends dying, which I hadn't been able to process because of the touring and, like the guilt and a lot of the other things, like trying to create and trying to keep on pushing music. It gave me a chance to slow down and opened up this space for me to be like, I've felt this type of pain and loss before, and now I know how complicated it is, so I can write about it. And I'm really proud of that song. And yeah, divine intervention for sure. Like what you're following is amazing work, and it is a shame like that there are people that don't believe this. Like I have a friend in Miami who was like walking around with a mask, and someone yelled in his face and was like, "You want me to cough in your face and give you COVID? It doesn't exist." I was like, all right. Of course it's in
Florida man strikes back.
All right. But yeah, I appreciate the insight that you have to bring, and like having someone that is on the front lines is scary.
Well, he appreciates you for saying that. I'm glad things are looking up for you. You've been through so much in the last few, I guess years. I would probably say years at this point. Like you've been through a lot, but it seems, I hope that you are doing so much better and you are just creating and finding catharsis in that. And I want to say thank you so much for also coming on here. I know I could talk to you forever, for literally ever. You are so interesting.
I love this. This is amazing.
Yeah, you're so interesting. You are so cool. And oh my God, I can really talk to you for hours. Maybe I'll do a part 2 for this. I don't know. Yeah, I probably
awesome.
will. So is there anything you would like to plug? Where can we find you? Where can we listen to your music, your bandmates' music?
Yeah, I would love for people to follow us on Instagram for sure, because that is the platform that I feel the most secure in sharing our deepest selves and like our truest parts of our story. So definitely follow us there at the Sunset Kings, and then follow us on YouTube, because another place where we have a platform to share our story as we want to tell it. Again, youtube.com/the Sunset Kings. And the solo projects will be coming out on that channel as well. People will be updated if they just follow us on those 2 things. Yeah, and I just want to say to anybody who's listening, you can DM us on Instagram. We respond to all messages, even hate messages. We respond to those too. Like I have responded to a lot of hate messages and then just had actual conversations with people. So honestly, at this point, it's just like there is so much pain going on. People have been locked up for so long in their houses, and understand it is really tough. And if someone meant to, if anyone needs to like yell at somebody, I can take that and dish it back. So the invitation's out there.
Oh my gosh, I love to hear it. That is so funny and so odd that they would go to their DM you. Very weird. But hey, it is what it is. Thank you so much for your time. Guys, go listen to him. He's the coolest person ever. This guy is so cool. And yeah, thank you so much for your time. And I will catch you on the flip side. Bye.